Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Thursday's episode of Trending. It's great to be here with you as always. Well, it's been quite a week, hasn't it, here in British politics, and quite a week here in the world in terms of the fallout of these Epstein file releases. You know, the ones that if you listen to American commentators like Ben Shapiro, don't even exist. Yet 3 million files have dropped this week, and it's fair to say they've caused quite a stir. They've not caused much more of a stir than in British politics and the British royal family. Now, we already knew there was ties, or even the normies knew there was ties between former Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. They knew there was ties between former US or ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson, former frontbencher Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, I should say, who was heavily involved in the Gordon Brown Labour Party when they were in charge, and is obviously a close ally of Starmer, seems to have numerous connections and be essentially a father figure in politics to a lot of Labour frontbenchers now, including Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who's been touted as one of the people looking to replace Starmer. So a lot of people have come out of this very badly from their association with him. The Labour Party, whose approval rating was as low as it could possibly be, as low as around the time of the Black Plague at the moment, somehow has even got lower after these scandals. And you've got a Prime Minister, Kier Starmer, who is desperately trying to put out fires all over the place to hold on his grip, or pathetic grip, to power. When really, I think that ship has sailed. I would be very surprised, sat here on Thursday, if by the time we do this show, Thursday next week, Starmer is still in power. Unless he's meant to be. Because this is the key to discuss here. Political scandals which lead to the heads of certain people rolling. You know, you can apply that to everything, really. Watergate, you can apply it to this. They generally only happen when they're allowed to happen. Because we know, and anyone that's done any research has known, that your Epsteins, your Savills, and so on, tie into the highest levels of government, of political institutions, of entertainment, music, film, all of those things, and have done for decades. And there is inevitably people like Savile and Epstein that exist in the modern times now. Now, this isn't new information. This is new information to millions and millions of people who have refused to acknowledge this, who have called people who have talked about it over the last few years tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. But for people like us and the likes of you watching this show, this isn't a revelation. Nothing in these files surprises you. All these act as is a confirmation of what you knew, and a confirmation to people who called you crazy that what you were saying had validity to it. So the idea that these have come out and it's a big revelation and it's a big scandal and this is all organic, I don't buy. Of course, sometimes things do get out into the public arena that cannot be suppressed anymore. And I think that's what's happened here. The overwhelming push for the release of these files, the fact that I mentioned this, I think, earlier in the week, that people didn't back down. People didn't walk off and get on with their lives. They carried on going, no, we want to see these. We want to know names. We want to know who this guy connects into. The fact that relentless pressure continued, I think is one of the reasons these files have been released. Another one is that I think they're happy probably to throw certain people under the bus, because as we talked about earlier in the week, is who these files names is important, but who it doesn't name is equally as important, because there's a lot of people it hasn't named that you know were fundamentally involved in some way, shape or form. Yet they don't really seem to have come out of these particularly badly. Yet we know they were involved. So who it's named and who it's not named are equally as important, because you know that who it hasn't named are the people they are trying to protect. The people it's named are the people they are happy to throw to the wolves. So if there's a scandal that leads to somebody's head rolling, you know invariably that's part of the plan. So as we I think Gareth spoke about this quite a while ago now. In the lead up to Boris Johnson taking leadership in the Conservative Party, for example, he said a number of things that if other people had said, their political careers would have been over, you know, describing Muslim women as letterboxes and things like that. If Jeremy Corbyn at the time, when he was leader of the Labour Party, had have said that, uproar. The press would have been all over it. Whereas Johnson said it, people laughed it off because Johnson had a role to play, which he then did play through lockdowns and through COVID. Starmer, the same. We spoke at length about the story involving the torching of his cars by the 3 Ukrainian gentlemen who have clear ties to either escort services and so on. And that his personal vehicles they targeted, not government vehicles, personal vehicles at personal addresses. So that was a scandal waiting to come out. And obviously the connections between Mandelson and Epstein, Mandelson and a number of other prominent Labour figures, including the Prime Minister, including Wes Streeting, as I've mentioned, who was touted as a possible next one. These were always going to come out at some point. Now, when you've got things on people, you've got leverage over people, when that comes out, it's really up to you. That's how blackmail works. You blackmail somebody to get them to do what you want based on the threat that if they don't, or they are surplus to requirements at some point, whatever it is you have on them, whether it's pictures, stories, information, whatever, they do that based on the threat that will come out and be made public and will destroy their lives or their political careers or their marriages or their relationship with their children or whatever it might be, or they'll go to jail if what you have on them comes out. That's literally how blackmail works. And that's literally how Jeffrey Epstein worked. His job was to get compromat on officials, on people in positions of public influence, whether that be celebrities, whether that be musicians, whether that be actors, to then be used in future to keep them in line. He certainly wasn't doing it for the Russians, though. Now, anger among Labour MPs, because here's a very important thing to mention. I don't need to mention this too much because you all know this, obviously. Every Labour MP, every MP in Westminster is not involved in this. Of course they're not. There will be people who have slipped through the net, if you like, and have got into politics with genuine intentions. However, I would imagine a place like Westminster is almost like a vacuum, that you're constantly being pulled into a certain mindset, a certain attitude, and you'd have to be a very strong, principled figure to not get pulled into that. So I would suggest that quite a lot of people who went into the politics in the backbenchers, just representing their local constituencies over the years, maybe they had a business or something in that local constituency and wanted to try and give something back, maybe went into Westminster with honest intentions and then got pulled in over time, the longer and longer they spent in there. Now, this is quite a fresh parliament, obviously. There's a lot of MPs in there that are in there for the first time, particularly on the Labour benches. And there is understandably a lot of anger among them for a number of reasons. One being, this isn't a Labour party. This isn't a party for working people whatsoever. Secondly, most of them know that come the next election, they're losing their seats because of the way that this government has handled everything. And thirdly, they're guilty by association. You know, like we've seen with the Conservative Party, Kemi Berdnek has come in to a party that's in complete disarray and a complete mess, and she's not able to do anything with it. It's kind of suffering a slow death. Starmer's done that to the Labour Party. I would be shocked if at the next election they get a quarter of the seats they've got now, and all of a sudden whoever picks up the pieces is going to have to try and recover that. And a lot of these young MPs that are in here for the first time know that that will probably fall on their shoulders. So there's a lot of political, what's the word I'm looking for? Political ambition under threat here from a lot of these people. And there'll also be some genuine people in there that are disgusted and angry and want answers as to how someone like Mandelson, who had such a prominent involvement through the Labour Party over the years, except under Jeremy Corbyn, I'll add, was allowed to slip through the net and get such high prominent positions, despite clearly a very budding friendship with one of the world's sickest and twisted men. Those things don't happen by accident. This is the thing. Pretty much everything you see on the stage, of the world stage, is planned and carefully calculated. People always use the phrase, the world's a stage, the world's a theatre. Well, what do we know about theatres and things that appear on stages? They're scripted. They're rehearsed. They're planned. They're not organic. They're not happening because, someone just decided to go rogue. That happens on occasion, but most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, things happen because they are designed to happen. They are scripted. And I would suggest that this fallout could well be scripted. There could be a number of different plays as to why they're doing that. One being to put pressure on the people in positions of power. Two being the people in positions of power are now surplus to requirement, so they're going to get pushed out in these scandals to be replaced with new ones. Another option, which has been raised by a few people, is We know their plan is to go towards a technocracy. Now, at the moment, they pay lip service to the fact we live in a democracy. We officially have the right to go and vote. Okay, we vote for two cheeks on the same arse. However, we officially have the right to vote. And come 4 years, 5 years, however long it is, at the ballot box, if people don't like somebody in a position of power, they can do something about it. Who they replace them with is the problem, because it invariably is someone who's going to do the same thing. But officially, they have to answer to the public. If pressure rises enough on Starmer, he, as a figurehead, will go. Be replaced with somebody probably very similar, but there's at least that changing of the public face of something, at least. Now, we know they want to get rid of that. They want to take this towards a technocracy where you have appointed officials, not elected ones. Almost certainly the incoming Prime Minister, Nigel Farage, spoke about the fact that half his cabinet would probably be appointed. So half the people in his government that are in key positions running departments, whether that's the Treasury, whether that's the Foreign Ministry, whether that's the Home Secretary, whether that's Environment, whatever it may be, Education, they will be appointed rather than elected. So they're not going to be answerable to the electorate. That's essentially a stepping stone towards a technocracy. Now, a good way to do that is to completely remove any confidence and any belief in politicians. Now, most people, I would suggest, already are there. Most people already know politicians lie or are incompetent at best. And you filled the front bench of this Labour Party with some of the thickest, most ignorant, vacuous figures you can possibly imagine. One being the Prime Minister, another being Liz Kendall, the Education Secretary, or David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, Ed Miliband, the Environment Secretary. These are some of the most bizarrely unintelligent people you could possibly meet that are in positions of apparent power and influence. When they're not really, they're just being played by the people behind them that run their departments, their advisors and so on. And they're so thick, they probably think all the policies are their own. And they're so vacuous and so power hungry, they're not really bothered as long as their name is on telly all the time or their name is connected to these things. They just want this political power. They don't want it for any other reason than to have it. They don't want to do it, anything good with it. Power for power's sake is what the root of most problems are. If you gain power and influence because you're doing something of note and of credit, and you're doing something that is helping people, then I have no problem with that, because people will elect to give it to you. Whereas in this case, they're doing the exact opposite of that. They want these titles and they don't care how they get them, really. Hence why they swap departments every 5 minutes without having any knowledge of the department they're leaving to the one they're going into. What credentials does Liz Kendall have to be Education Secretary, for example? Absolutely none. It's just a title. So essentially, removing any more confidence in politicians is a great way to sell your technocracy, because there is still some people that go to the ballot box. A lot of people went to the ballot box to vote Labour thinking it might well change things back in 2024. Obviously, it was never going to change things. Anyone with a brain cell knew it was never going to change things, because the people that control the Labour Party control the Conservative Party, control reform. The same way the people that control the Democrats control the Republicans. That's why no matter what party are in power, the main direction of travel of a country doesn't change. It always keeps going. It might go slightly slower, it might go slightly quicker, depending who's in power, but the travel is always in the same direction. So if they remove that completely, to the point that when you offer then, look, this hasn't worked, democracies don't work, we clearly don't elect people with enough intelligence or enough experience in certain areas, then we need to bring in people who know what they're doing. We need to bring in business leaders to run the business departments. We need to bring in education experts to run the education departments and so on. Now, I have no issue with people who have been in industry, who understand how certain things work, being part of departments. I have no issue with that. I think that makes sense. Someone that understands how to build a business should be involved in the business secretary's department. Of course they should. None of those Labour or most of the Tories have ever done that. They don't. A lot of them have never worked a real day in their life. I understand that should be an influence, but that should be headed by an elected official at all times. Ideally, an elected official who knows what they're talking about, and those people exist. Those people exist out there in society, but unfortunately, very, very few of them end up in those positions of influence, because that's not the plan. Don't want a business secretary that understands business and understands how growing businesses helps people. They don't want that, do they? Because that's not going to bring people further and further down into servitude. That's going to prop them up. It's not what they want. So by removing any trust in politicians, the technocracy argument all of a sudden becomes something that will be less of an outrage to people. Right now, if you offered that, or 5 years ago you offered that, we're going to get rid of the elections, we're just going to appoint officials, people would be in outrage. Right now, I don't think the outrage would be anything like the same. And that, again, like I've said, is not organic. That is by design. It's softening public opinion to bring about the outcome that they want. So, long story short, this scandal is almost certainly by design to create an outcome. Exactly what that outcome is, time will tell. Whether it's to get rid of Starmer to bring in somebody else, whether it's to create more disillusion from people on politics, there could be a number of different reasons, a number of different things at play, and time will show what that is. Right, if you're watching with us on Twitter or YouTube, that's it for the free version of the show. If you head over to iconic.com, we're going to talk about potential replacements for Starmer. Should he resign? We're going to talk about Prince Andrew, and we're going to talk about a summer camp leader here in the Midlands who admits to a number of quite shocking things. And this is quite a dark story to discuss, but I think it's very important because protecting your children is key. And I think knowing these kind of people exist in places that we should expect our children to be safe will encourage parents to be a lot more vigilant. So I'll see you over on Iconic.